Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Let me begin. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words, or just do it. How many times have you heard expressions like these? Even though they might be true, how many times do you find yourself feeling discouraged, even when you try and the things that you do and say really don't matter? How often do you let your self-doubt stop you from doing something or even dreaming about doing something? For a long time, that was my life. When my daughter was a little girl, she used to say, "Dad, stop talking about it, be about it." At the time, I just thought it was a cute expression she would say to guilt me into doing something. But now as I look back at my path and what my life has taken, I can appreciate the deeper wisdom of these words, spoken in the innocence of childhood, and have found inspiration in them, which I want to share with you here today. Part of how I want to share my story with you over the next 15 minutes or so will be through the pictures that you'll see behind me. These pictures represent the people that have meant the most to me in my life. My parents, my children, my friends, my colleagues, family, and the people I love. My experience isn't remarkable. In fact, I would say, compared to what many others have experienced across the world and within the scope of humanity, my experience is probably pretty ordinary. Although I went through a lot growing up, I never had to live through the horrors of war or the tragedy that comes with the loss of parents or children or siblings at an early age. Perhaps many of you have. No matter what your life experience has been, I'm pretty sure all of us have had moments of pain, disappointment, fear, loss, and my enemies, self-doubt. The reality of the situation is that any one of these things can stop us dead in our tracks. So how do we get ourselves moving in the right direction? I think it can be different for all of us, but for me, a big part of it was learning the lesson of kindness. Not kindness as a handout or out of pity, but kindness as an act. Actions that inspired transformation in my own life, and that led me to try and make a difference in the lives of others. I come from a very simple beginning. I'm the second oldest of immigrant parents who came to the U.S. from Mexico and tried to provide a better life for their children. Neither one of them had more than a primary education. Neither one of them spoke English. Yet neither of them let any of this stop them from coming here and settling in East San Jose, where I was born and raised. Every day they slaved away working in the fields, construction, canneries, doing everything they could to provide. Some of my earliest memories were going to pick fruits with them in the fields to help put food on the table. My parents worked all the time, so as I got older and started school, I became one of those children who had to learn on their own and take care of myself from a very early age and look after my younger brothers. We did the best we could, but honestly, looking back, it wasn't the best situation. Without my parents' watchful and protective eye, I experienced some really bad things during that time that I would never want anyone to go through. Nevertheless, I always felt loved and supported by my parents. I knew they were doing the best that they could, but that didn't mean it wasn't a tough situation. I knew that if I was having trouble in school, they really couldn't help me with my homework. It wasn't that they weren't smart enough. They just didn't have the skills or the understanding of the language well enough. They didn't know anything about the resources that were available out there to help me, and they didn't know how to guide or encourage me to pursue higher education because they had never experienced it themselves. I never saw my parents ask for help. They never took a handout. In fact, despite the circumstances, I saw them giving all the time, sending money to family, cooking food for others. Watching them figure things out and provide for everybody made me feel like I should be doing the same. So I looked at accepting help as a weakness and mistook kindness for pity. Because of this, I struggled as a student. I didn't get the best grades. I always got in trouble for acting out and talking to my friends during class, especially in high school. I was starting to become known as a troublemaker. Chapter 1 in my life, what does it mean to be about it? I had this one English teacher named Mr. Didiero. He put me on the spot a lot. To get me to stop talking and acting out when I should be learning, he made me a student teacher, and I had to sit next to him at the front of the class and help him grade papers. I didn't think I was smart enough to grade papers or to student teach, but being up there helped me focus and actually enjoyed it. One day, he surprised me by announcing to the entire class that I was going to teach class that day. I had never had a more embarrassing moment. I wasn't prepared, and I didn't know what to say or what to do. I doubted myself, but I got up there because, honestly, I didn't think I had a better option at the moment. And all of a sudden, my entire body started itching and started scratching all over, and all the kids started laughing at me. When it was over, I was so angry at Mr. DiDiego that I yelled at him and said, "I will never do anything like this again." But he calmly told me, yes, I would, and that the next time would be fine because I just had experienced the most embarrassing moment of my life, and I would never be scared to do anything else ever again. He said, from now on, everything will be easier. He was right, and in that moment, I learned something that it's better to face your fears and fail than to never even try. I was learning to conquer my self-doubts. Later that same year, on the day when I was particularly bored, I ended up talking almost all the way through class because apparently I didn't learn my lesson the first time. When class was over, Mr. DiDiego asked me to stay after class. I rolled my eyes and thought, oh, here we go again. But Mr. DiDiego didn't suspend me or expel me. He actually asked me a question that I wasn't ready for. He asked me, Fred, are you ready to graduate soon? And are you going to go to college after high school? I shrugged and answered, I wasn't sure. I hadn't really thought about it. Honestly, I was thinking that this was none of his business, and I got kind of annoyed by the question. I told him that my uncle said that I could go work with him as a garbage collector. And you know, they make pretty good money. Or with my dad to go work construction. So I had options at the time. Mr. DiDiego then asked me if I had thought about going to college. And I said, no, not really. I had never really thought about it, and I really didn't know anything about college. So I didn't know where to start or if it was for me. He said, well, but it is for you. And I said, well, if that's true, I don't even know how people go to college. He said, well, we're not going to let that stop you. He was the first and only teacher that had ever talked to me about college, and he didn't just talk about it. He jumped into action and took me to every college in the area and showed me what it was like, how to apply, and then pushed me to do so. Once I got in, he even paid for my first semester of tuition. I didn't want the help, but he said it wasn't charity. He said it was paying it forward for the work that I was going to do and the difference I was going to make in the lives of others. Even though I wasn't quite sure what he meant by that at the time, it has stuck with me and it has made an impact on me. So what if it hadn't been for Mr. DiDiego? How would my life be different? I'm up here speaking to you in front of you because he inspired me to make transformation in my life. Where I felt I could never give up and speak in front of a crowd or help teach or lead a class, I discovered that I actually could. He taught me to face my failures, my self-doubts, and do things anyone else had the ability to do. Where I thought I would follow my parents' path without even daring to dream about my own, I was challenged to aim higher, and I ended up becoming the first in my family to go to college. When I accepted help to pay for college, I learned the difference between taking a handout and learning to accept help as a prepayment for the work that has yet to be done. This is what it means to be about it. This is what happens when talking about doing things become actually something more and inspiring transformation through the simple acts of kindness. Chapter 2, to be about it, I have to first be myself. The next pivotal moment that really impacted my life was my time at St. Mary's College. Right after high school, I had attended community college, and even though it took me a bit longer to get through than most people, I really thought after I was done that I might just go to a trade school or even go to San Jose State where many of my friends are going. But once again, I was challenged to dream bigger and to do more. At the time, during my community college days, I met my counselor, Josie Gutierrez, who challenged me to apply to schools my friends weren't attending and to go for higher ranked, even Ivy League schools. At the time, I didn't know what Ivy League schools meant. I thought it was a school in my neighborhood that was called Ivy League. So when I applied to many of the schools, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, I chose and I got accepted to go to St. Mary's. And it was a very proud moment for me. When I got there, it was a different story. I felt completely out of place. Not only was I the only brown student in my class, it seemed like everybody else was driving Mercedes, BMWs, and I pulled up on the first day of class driving a 1979 Chevy Chevette with the coat hanger as a shift. And you'll see it in my pictures here once they start. I questioned whether I got in because of the color of my skin. I wanted to fit in, but I stood out like a sore thumb. This place was a completely different ballgame for me, and I didn't know the rules of the game. After a couple of weeks, I called my mom and told her I'm coming home. I told her that I tried, but there was no one like me, and everything was so different from what I expected, and I don't think I could do this. It was then that she told me, son, you can't quit because you can't come home because your brothers paid for your college. Once again, I felt the weight of my responsibility turn what had been paid forward to me in advance. I had to face my self-doubts and find a way to be about it. I decided to study psychology because I wanted to figure out what people do, why people do certain things or act in certain ways, and also to help me come to terms with some of the traumas I had experienced as a child. I worked really hard to prove that I was smart enough and to do the work, but I realized that the harder I tried to fit in and to be like everybody else, the more miserable I was. No matter what I did or what I said, I wasn't fooling anybody. The more I tried to prove I was something I wasn't, the more my true colors shined through. It took some time, but one of the most valuable things I learned in my time there was that only in those moments where I wasn't trying to fit in or be somebody else or do what everyone else is doing did I really shine. What if it hadn't been for Miss Gutierrez encouraged me to dream bigger? Would I have gone to St. Mary's? Probably not. What if it wasn't for my mom yelling at me that I couldn't quit? Would I have come home? Probably yes. Because I stayed, I learned to conquer my self-doubts while embracing my identity and my culture. I learned that a brown boy from a poor family, the first of my family, could go to college and do great things. That I could do them better by embracing my identity and doing them my own way. If anything, I should be proud of my heritage because doing something that no one else like me was doing. More importantly, I learned that I wanted to be about it, so I'd have to be the first. Chapter 3, be about it, inspiring transformation in others. My path toward public service began after college. I began my career working in admissions for many community colleges and eventually becoming the director of student affairs and the assistant director for admissions at Stanford University, the School of Medicine. It was during my time at Stanford that I began to notice how few applicants were coming from disadvantaged communities or students of color or other ethnicities, and that really bothered me. I wanted to know why. I wanted to do something about it because now I knew that some kids probably weren't applying because they come from very similar backgrounds as myself, capable but full of self-doubt or without their own identity. Mr. Diego and Ms. Gutierrez, they had challenged me. During that time, it made me sit to think about all the moments where there was an opportunity to inspire transformation in the lives of these kids, but no one did anything about it, and as a result, kids were slipping through the cracks. Something had to be done, and I decided it was up to me to do it. So I decided to run for the San Jose Evergreen College Board of Trustee. I wasn't prepared at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, and as Mr. Diego said to me many, many years ago, that should not ever stop me. One of the most difficult things that you have to do when you're running for office is raising money, which is not something that I had ever done or felt comfortable with. Still, I looked at it as a handout, and I had a really hard time accepting charity, so I hesitated. At the time, I talked to my mom and told her about my problem, and she said, "Don't worry about it, son. We'll make tamales and we'll raise $30,000. It was a naive solution to the problem, but her words made a light bulb go out off in my head, and I realized that that was no different from those moments where my teacher paid for my first semester of college or my brothers paid for my tuition at St. Mary's College. Raising money wasn't about taking charity. It was about paying it forward so that I could work to bring change to others who wanted to be just like me. I turned talk into action and raised the money I needed and was elected for the first time, gaining over 70% of the votes. During my time on the college board, I pushed for equal hiring practices for people of color and different ethnicities, both in administration and faculty, so there was more representation, more diversity. As I fought for better pay for teachers who to this day don't earn what they should. I made it my mission to advocate for students of all backgrounds, all races, genders, creeds, to have the same opportunities for a good education than those privileged ones did. By doing so, we were awarded a diversity award by the State Chancellor's Office for our efforts. Outside of my time serving on the College Board, I co-founded the Latino Leadership Alliance in partnership with Stanford University and many, many other organizations. Many of the missions of these groups was to help disfranchised youth have access to resources I never had as a kid. Resources like guidance counselors, free tutoring, homework help, college prep resources, college recruitment fairs, application assistance. I also helped establish educational scholarships in honor of my children and my parents. In 2006, I was asked to run for the San Jose City Council, and I would have considered it, but at that time, my mom got really sick, and I decided that was not the route I was going. I moved from San Jose to Gilroy so I could be closer to my parents and help take care of my mom. Moving to Gilroy was a big adjustment for me because back in those days, Gilroy was still a very small town with no Highway 101 and very little development in the area. Still, I knew there was an opportunity for me to serve my community. So in 2008, I was encouraged to run for the Gilroy Unified School Board, and I won, eventually serving 8 years. Some of the initiatives I've championed during that time that I'm most proud of were the No F policy and community service requirements before graduation. No, I did not push for the F policy and community service hours to make it harder for kids to play sports or to add more graduation requirements. I did it for a couple reasons. Having looked through thousands of college applications over the years, I knew the kids that played sports had a better chance of getting accepted into colleges because they were seen more well-rounded, but only when their applications showed good grades. I also knew that sometimes kids could get into sports and their academics suffered, and it made it hard for them to get into good colleges. So the No F policy was a way to increase the chances for every student to play sports or get involved in activities in schools and get into the schools that they really wanted to apply to. Colleges also liked accepting kids that felt that they would return to their own communities and give back. Yet so many kids from disadvantaged communities were giving up on their own hometowns and saying things like, there's no opportunities here, there's nothing for me to do here, there's no future in my town. This was their mindset, but unfortunately, unless I could do something about changing that, these kids would be missing the greatest opportunity that they had to set themselves apart. They needed to be inspired to take what they learned from their college education and bring it back to their communities. Not only was this great for the kids and their communities, but it was exactly what colleges were looking for. Ironically, kids from disadvantaged communities had the most to offer, but instead of embracing their identity, their heritage, their culture, and their community, they were leaving it all behind and missing the chance to stand out on their college applications. Community service was a great way to help solve the problem by getting more kids to see the value of giving back to their community and showing them by volunteering they could actually be part of the solution. I was proud of the progress I was making to promote equity, diversity, inclusion in the classroom, but I knew that there was more that needed to be done for the community as a whole. So in 2006, I decided to run for city council in Gilroy and now have served 2 terms. Serving as a council member and for a while there as vice mayor for the last 6 years has challenged me to find ways to continue to advocate for the underrepresented. My mission has been to bring positive change to help everybody feel that they're seen, they're heard, and given a voice in the community that they live in. I wanted to inspire transformation But I also knew that I just not talked about the change I wanted to see. I needed to be about it. So I got to know the members of my community. I engaged with them, visited their neighborhoods, their businesses. I listened to their stories so I could understand their challenges, which many times were very similar to mine. Then I found a way to build bridges so together with my fellow council members and the city and community leaders, we could work to find solutions and remove barriers that would make our community better for everyone. By interacting with my community and bringing their needs back to the city, I helped drive some initiatives that promote equity, inclusion, and diversity that were missing before. Things like recognizing Pride Month and having the Pride flag raised at City Hall for the first time in the history of Gilroy. Recognizing the important it is to honor the legacy of important leaders that really have made an impact on our community. I advocated for the city of Gilroy to recognize Cesar Chavez Day as an official holiday, and the city council voted unanimously to approve this a few weeks ago. As a council member, I was appointed by my peers to serve on ad hoc committees for the homeless and also chaired an ad hoc committee for our downtown revitalization. Serving on these committees was more about just sitting down. It was about talking about it and doing things. It was about finding creative solutions that the city could act on. Because of the work that was done on the homeless committee, the city has hired specialized, trained resource officers to help the underhoused receive care resources that they weren't receiving before. Because of the work done on the downtown revitalization, new programs to help our small, struggling businesses have been implemented. A new pop-up park, lighting, security, park management. Outside of my time serving on city council, I've looked for other ways to give back to my community as well. Shortly after the tragic events at the Gilroy Garlic Festival on July 28, 2019, I helped co-found the Gilroy Strong movement to rally support and bring communities together, and then coordinated a benefit concert to raise money for the victims. Last year, I also co-founded the first car show and salsa tasting competition to raise money for our fire and police. Every year, I help organize a Santa meet and greet and holiday giveaways to support our local Head Start preschool families and Salvation Army families, giving away over 300 wrapped toys, turkeys, and tons of food. I also created an organization called the South County Youth for Change, a public organization that provides support services in Gilroy. The members and volunteers will continue to develop community partnerships to inspire, empower the well-being of youth throughout leadership platforms that connect us with our local communities and create service learning opportunities. In March of this year, after bravely fighting many battles, my beautiful mom recently passed away. Sometimes the paths that you take in life can have unintended consequences. I would never imagine all those years ago when I decided to step outside of my comfort zone and apply for that position at Stanford, that I would be with doctors that I had formed professional relationships with, or the students that I reviewed applications and eventually got into Stanford School of Medicine, that would be the same doctors and nurses who ended up caring for my mom. They were so instrumental in providing the best care possible. Because of their care, my mom was able to grace us with her presence for many, many years longer than she initially was diagnosed. I will forever be grateful for them and thankful that I took that leap of faith because it had such a profound impact in my life and my family. Even though my mom has left this earth, she has left behind her legacy of kindness and action that will never be forgotten or will I ever let die. I know that legacy will carry on with my children, with the ones that I love, and hopefully it will live on in some of the lives that I've been able to touch. In closing, whatever I've been able to accomplish, no matter what challenges I have overcome or self-doubt that I have conquered, it's been inspired by others' acts of kindness that have really transformed the way that I think nowadays. Every day of your life matters. Every experience you have can be meaningful. Every person that you meet can be a point of influence. If it had not been for my English teacher, Mr. Didieto, or my counselor, Ms. Gutierrez, or my colleague, Mr. Garcia at Stanford University, if it hadn't been for my mom, my dad, my children, my friends, the people I love, if it hadn't been for me, if it hadn't been for you, what if it hadn't been for you? What life would you have impacted? You see, you don't have to be special, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to come from money, or have a stable household, or have even a good education, or even be from this country. My parents did it, and they didn't have any of this. I did, and I had very little more than what they did. How about you? Your story doesn't have to be remarkable for you to be extraordinary. All you have to do is be about it. So I challenge you. Don't talk about it, be about it. Thank you.